This video is going to be a quick run through of all the new features and changes that we've made to Limber version 1.6. It's really designed for existing users who are already familiar with 1.5 and just want to get up to speed with what's different. So if you're completely new to Limber as of summer 2020, then you're probably better off watching the sort of standard video training series that we'll have on the aescripts YouTube channel. But if you are familiar with Limber already, then watch this to explain all the things that you will need to know once you've installed the new panel. So the first thing is this rename button here, which just renames the suffixes for the layer names in a Limber limb. So here we have ankle, hip and leg in these three layers, and if I wanted this to be an arm rather than a leg, I could select the arm preset here, click rename, and it'll just change the three names of those layers. It's as simple as that. Obviously it uses the presets that are in the preset editor there to change. If you want to change the word left, the sort of suffix, then you have to do that manually still. The second button is this rig and pose, which actually combines two different functions in one button because you can use them at the same time. So let's look at the pose function first of all. And that's really based on the fact that Limber's tapered limbs, as you may know, are based on a geometry of three circles that are kind of connected smoothly around the outside. And in many cases, if you're designing a character with that kind of thing in mind in Illustrator, then there's a new way here to sort of speed up the rigging process, in that you could use three circle layers like this to set the properties of a limb. So obviously I've designed this character in Illustrator. I've got all these Illustrator layers here. Nothing's rigged up or anything like that, but I've included a bunch of circle layers at the positions of my four limbs. So if I select these three, starting with the shoulder or hip and then going down to the wrist, and then if I click rig and pose, there is this new options panel which shows you a sort of representation of which layers are being used for what. So we have this hip shoulder reference layer here, and then the knee, and then the ankle, and those drop downs are all selected correctly, and it tells me what it's going to do. This will create a new limb, because if we just selected an existing limb, then it would simply pose that one. There's no limb in this comp, so I'll click OK, wants a name, and then it's just made me a limb which looks exactly like the one that I already had in the background there, because it's based on those three circles. So that's a very sort of fast way of kind of posing your limb, rather than having to sort of set everything manually with lengths and so on and so forth. If I had used circles of different colors, then it would apply those colors to the three different colors in the Limber effect as well, but those ones just all happen to be the same color. So let's get rid of that limb and then show you the rig function. So now we have this ability to add vector art from shape layers into limbs. So in this instance, of course, I don't have any shape layers yet, but my left arm art here is these sort of scales on the character's shoulder. And in this instance, I could use the create shapes from vector layer to make a shape layer that looks exactly the same. Then I would need to select my three layers just like I did before, and this time select the art layer as well. Then when I click rig and pose, it's going to give me the option and show me this little star, meaning it's a shape layer, so that I can add that to an art layer of one of two, because we can also add art to the lower half of the limb. I'm not doing that at this point. So then when I click OK, it's going to do the same thing again. It's going to pose a new limb, but it's also going to add the artwork in. So if I solo these Limber layers, you'll see that it's put those shapes right there inside the limb layer, and that they're going to move around with the layer, and they're going to stretch and everything as well. So all of the dynamics properties will work seamlessly, and so will changes in length and so on. They'll all stretch the artwork just like you'd expect. In fact, I can even go inside the limb layer, of course, and let's just zoom in a bit. Come on, there we go. And if I use my pen tool, then I could, tweak these shapes a bit or whatever and get them how I want them. So obviously I could line things up to the edges of the limb and create whatever kind of artwork sort of matching that I wanted to do. So let's just zoom out of there. So the combination of that rig and pose function means that if you design in with Limber in mind, then you've got a like hyper efficient workflow from Illustrator into After Effects and then into Limber. And if you use something like Overlord to transfer your vectors from Illustrator to After Effects, you can make it even more efficient. Editing the artwork inside limbs can be a manual process like that, or if you want more additional sort of precision and functionality, I'd suggest you consider picking up PenPal, another tool that I make, which works really nicely in this situation because it can take account of all the transformations that are going on in the shape layer, and you get things to snap more easily and stuff like that. There is now a import library button down here at the bottom of the panel, which will just simply give you a way of setting a file path to wherever you want to keep your limb library file, and you'll always be able to go to that file very quickly and easily and import it just like normal, but it's just quicker and easier than going through the standard import dialog. There is no longer a replace button anywhere in the panel because we sort of discourage that now, but if you really do need to replace your limbs with default ones, then you can select the type of limb you want in the drop down, select the limb layer, then hold down Alt and click New, and it will replace it with a default version of that type. So the functionality is still there, it's just a little bit hidden. There is a brand new user guide, which instead of being a PDF is now online at limber.stevekirby.co.uk, and it's all cross-linked, so everything will take you from one page to another. There's more sort of full instructions in there, a few tips and so on and so forth. So the online format just enables me to keep it 100% up to date at all times. So that's good. So turning to the limbs themselves. Oh no, I missed out a button, didn't I? Yes. So this new path to bone button here is a very simple way of just making a 3-point path into a bone. So if I just make 3 points like this and click that button and give it a name, then Limber will go and do all the stuff it needs to do in order to just rig that up. So whatever properties you had in your stroke when you made the path will be inside the limb layer, and it's really just as simple as that. That's a nice fast way to make bones. The tapers, tapered limbs are now fully compatible with body moving by the default ones. So this little animation here I made a while ago, but I kind of rebuilt it using the new tapers, so you can see that her legs are tapered, the arms are tapers as well, and I've added these outline strokes and everything, and that works with body moving, and here it is on Lottie files just to prove that that works. Obviously if you are using body moving, then don't forget to make your settings have guide layers enabled by default. I don't think that is enabled by default, so turn that on. And if you're going all the way to Lottie, then you'll probably want this convert expressions to keyframes on, which is in this expression options 12 down in the new version of body moving, and that should all work just fine. The reason why things didn't work with body moving before is because body moving doesn't like merge paths. And previously we were making our tapered limbs with 3 ellipses that were then merged with these sort of wedge shapes that were in between them. But we found a way of making things pretty much exactly the same, but without using merged paths at all. So taper limbs are now constructed purely from Béziers. They're just extremely clever Bézier math path expressions in 4 places. So if I show all the expressions, you'll see there's really not all that many expressions in the limb layer, as there used to be absolutely hundreds. And one of the advantages of doing it this way is that I was able to add in this rounding to the default tapers. Now there was already a custom limb in the limb library that did this, but now it's in the default one. So if you are using faux 3D and you want a little bit of perspective on your limb at some point, that's all built in. If you want to use the old style limb with the literal 3 circles, the ellipse layers in there, there's still one in the limb library that is exactly the same. So you can just import that, or copy and paste that, and then you can kind of go and do whatever you want to do with your circles and so on. The only difference in appearance between the new ones and the old ones is that now the splits don't run all the way to the edge of the circle. So this is 0% upper split, and that's 100%. You'll see that it's going in between the centers of the circles rather than the circles themselves. In fact, if I just turn on these other layers, you'll see that this limb on the left is an old one, and you'll see that this one will split all the way right to the back of the circle there. Part of the advantage of doing it this way, of course, is that those splits don't move when you change size now, because obviously before, if I go changing this start size, you'll see that the split is traveling along the length of the limb, whereas with the new ones, let's just put the upper split somewhere else and then change the size in that same way. You'll see that the split stays the same. The anti-pop is set to 0 by default. The rotate end is set to 0 by default. I've turned this one up manually, and that just, it works better like that. You can always turn them up if you want to. Default bones, where's my bone? Here, have this bone curvature property. So I can actually add some curvature and bend into the default basic bones now. And you'll see that the controllers are moving correctly with that bend. They didn't do that before. There was already a bendy bone in the limb library, but the controllers didn't move properly, whereas now they do. One thing just to mention, of course, is that if you're using a taper or something which doesn't bend, and you do turn up that bend curvature property, you'll see that the controllers are going to move as if you had a bendy bone in there. There's the controllers can't tell what kind of limb layer you've actually got selected, so just look out for that. The controller rotation is no longer user adjustable, so the rotation value of this end controller here will always be as it's kind of meant to be, no matter how I play around with it there. The old ones here that you'll see, you could always offset the rotation value yourself, which in some ways was useful for sort of further rotating hands or feet that were parented to that controller, but also had sometimes problems if you parented it to another layer that was rotated and then unparented it. Sometimes it would jump. So the new method is to simply rotate the hand or foot layer itself if you want to rotate your feet manually in that way. I'll just come back here and make a new limb to show you that now controllers' rotations are set to 0 by default when they point down rather than 180, which is just better for if parenting feet layers, for example. You tend to find the old way that your foot layer would show a rotation of -180, which is a bit confusing and unintuitive. So now that's just prevented by the rotation being 0 when things point downwards. FK controllers are going to rotate more consistently with IK normal end controllers. There was a few little bugs in there and discrepancies in the way that the things auto-rotated before. If I add a joint controller to this leg, you will see that now joint controllers can rotate in sort of 4 different ways. They can not rotate, or they can rotate with the upper part of the limb, with the lower part of the limb, or outwards along wherever the knee goes, like that. Handy if you want to parent something to your knee. Limber 1.6 is only compatible with After Effects CC 2018 and newer, and Limber 1.6 is not compatible with limbs that were generated in previous versions. So just like when we went up to 1.5, the panel didn't work with limbs generated in version 1. This panel won't work with limbs generated in 1.5. So I would suggest that you rename your current limber.jsx bin file to limber 1.5 and keep it somewhere so that you can go back to edit existing projects and, you know, add controllers or whatever you need to do with them if your client comes back to you with changes in the future. And then you can also carry on using the new version from here on or whatever. Okay, so that's it for this video. I've skirted over things fairly quickly, but if you'd like to know more about the new rig and pose functions, you can check out a video on the aescripts YouTube channel that is specifically about those, where I run through a number of different examples in addition to that character that you saw earlier in this video. If you've got any questions about Limber or how to rig certain types of limb or whatever, by all means get in touch with me via any of the usual channels, and subscribe to the aescripts YouTube channel and keep your eye out for more videos on there about Limber. Take care, be well, and I'll see you soon. Bye.